Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is another edition of New Orleans by Night. Just for developer and admin awareness, all roles for this scene have been done in advance. All players involved are happy with the way this scene took place. There's no rules clarifications, and everyone was very much aware that this would be a combat scene before agreeing to anything. So, with no further ado, the last time we saw our intrepid adventurers was in the Crescent Cigar Bar, in the back room, invited by Mr. Philip Kent, who had invited his bodyguard, Chris Hanash, to speak a little business, as well as... Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is not... Apologies. And also the business associate he wishes to garner support from, a Mr. Jack O'Shea. Words were exchanged, and many business acumen and flowery speeches were made. Unfortunately, during the course of the conversation, Mr. Kent revealed Mr. O'Shea's clan as being Setite. Unable to control his beast, Chris Hanash lashed out in a frenzy. And this is where we begin our scene. The red mist hazes over Chris Hanash. His eyes become bloodshot, his conscious mind driven back into that of wild compulsion and urge. The rage within him uncoils within his breast, his vitae pumps within his veins, drawing forth the unholy strength of Cain. He leaps with abandon, fangs glaring, his eyes sunken to serpentine pupils, as his hands outstretch, diving towards his foe, wanting nothing more than to tear asunder the thing in front of him, the creature that has tormented his dreams, that has tormented his very life. His hands grapple onto the clothing of Mr. O'Shea as he dives with such a force, knocking them both backwards. In a furious assault, the serpentine tongue lashes out of Chris Hanash's mouth, striking a deep wound into the left shoulder of Jack O'Shea, causing vitae to spill forth upon the beautiful leather couches. They fall in a bundle and a heap upon the floor, thrashing against each other as blows and grapples are exchanged.
Seeing Chris jump upon him, Jack instinctively calls upon the eyes of his god, the eyes of the serpent, as his pupils become slits, but it is too late. He is upon him, and to his horror, a serpent-like tongue emerges from Chris's mouth and slashes deep within him. The pain is off-put by the sheer ecstasy that is the bliss of the serpent's kiss, but it only fills him with disgust and rage that before him this person, who he had thought might actually potentially be a brother in disguise, is not but a usurper. The first instinct that comes to his head is that this is a serpent of the light. Who else could have such a clan discipline? Who else who had been trying to get so close to the Camarilla? And so, no longer focusing upon the eyes, he abandons it, and in his anger, despite the agony, despite the sheer pain that courses through his body, he lashes out with his own serpentine tongue, trying to let Mr. Hanash feel the sting of the axe. But this frenzied thing is too fast, and just as nimbly as he hopped onto him before, he leaps away. He's barely able to graze his clothes, although it leaves a slash upon it. Where he should have drawn blood, he drew none at all. And in his horror, he realized that this fight is not in his upper hand, and that things are very dire indeed.
Mr. Kent watches in horror as his bodyguard attacks his business partner in the middle of a cigar bar off of Bourbon Street. Kent's eyes go wide, not able to comprehend for a moment that Chris could be so monumentally either stupid or insane. He turns as quickly as he can. Expensive suit made with silk fabric, swishing quickly as he rushes to the door, closing the wooden partition off over the glass doors. Swings around looking at the caitiff who's holding down this Setite business partner, lashing him with his tongue. He attempts to say something to get his attention, but in his fluster, all Mr. Kent can muster is, "You have to stop! You are fucking up everything! I have a vision, damn it!"
With the beast fully in control of Chris's actions, the words of his employer, Mr. Kent, seem like garbled nonsense. Not being able to understand a single syllable is like the concept of language is alien to him. Nothing but the visceral pleasure of feeling the agony of his foe beneath him. He turns, taking a powerful hand, putting it into Mr. O'Shea's hair and yanking him roughly upwards, with face held high towards the exquisite mahogany coffee table with a delicate china lamp placed upon it, and with a brutality and a force only begetting a beast itself, he slams Mr. O'Shea's face deep into the mahogany table, causing splinters to fly out in all directions, the lamp smashed into pieces, a sickening crunch as cartilage and flesh and teeth are dislodged as such strength is pushed into the object, smashing it to pieces, and he repeats the process again and again, smashing his face into the shards of the table and then finally into the floor with a ferocity, with an anger, with a passion, simply to destroy, to completely annihilate that is in front of him.
Before the cold unconsciousness of torpor slips over Jack O'Shea, the last thing he thinks is that perhaps this is a fitting punishment for him. Perhaps this was some test set down. His brother had warned him before now. He had warned him not to think like a warrior, but at the same time, he was completely unprepared. He had no idea that such a creature of strength could have been hidden before his very eyes. How long had it been since he had tasted real combat, been in a situation where things were so intense that incredible violence could outbreak at the drop of a hat? He thinks that and realizes that he had been found unworthy, that this was his punishment for his own weakness, before he sinks into the death sleep that is torpor, as with one final smash, the coffee table is decimated, sending pieces of the lamp in wood flying everywhere.
Kent, with his back against the door, turns in time to see a head used like a crude sledgehammer to turn this table to dust. He balks at the idea for a moment and basically grabs the nearest chair, wanting to separate the two, thinking deep inside, maybe, just maybe, there's a way to salvage this entire fuck-up. He begins to mutter to himself like a mantra, a fuck, 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 and wedges, or attempts to wedge, a chair between the flailing claws and licking tongue of Chris and the now torpored Setite. As he puts the chair between the two of them, the Chris begins to swat at the chair like some ravenous animal, and basically swats it easily away. And Kent can only look on in horror.
The chair, the other kindred in the room, the surroundings, all of it dissipates. There is nothing but blackness. There is nothing but this moment. There is nothing but O'Shea and him. And it bubbles up inside him. The beast taunts again, showing him images of his priestess, Savina, and all the tortures and humiliations she put him through. Every word that poisoned his ear. Every action that ruined his life. Every cry that was never heard. Every opportunity he was never given. His entire life torn away from him, all because of the jealousy, all because of the teachings of the woman that made him a monster. And piece by piece, more of his control is lost as nothing but pure hot white rage courses through him. He does not feel the pain of the chair against him, nor the aching of his hands and knuckles as splinters cut into his fingers. He continues his tireless assault of hammering the skull down with wet crunches on the floor, cracks until matter begin to feel the wet, sickening crunch, turning into a sloppy, squelching puddle. And yet he is still not satisfied, and continues in the rhythmic sensation of bang, bang, bang.
Kent, seeing this grotesque abuse in front of him, doesn't think quite thoroughly enough, simply grabs the frenzied caitiff and with a huge heave pulls him off of the body and then picks him up and throws him down a flight of stairs, basically shouting after her, "Good God, get control of yourself, man!" He looks down at the ashing body before him and is beginning to realize that this evening has gone from uneventful to a potential business partnership, and now it's gone into full-on damage control. His mind is already working like a well-oiled machine. All right, I've got to contact the right people. I've got to make sure that this doesn't get out. We've got to make sure we don't have a major masquerade breach here. We got to. And then he hears a noise coming up the stairs.
Leaping like that of some crazed animal, Chris leaps up the stairs and squats, almost predatory, almost vulture-like, on the banister itself, balancing on his haunches, arms wide and sprayed, his eyes locked in hatred against the being that has taken away his source of comfort. He lets out a threatening hiss and bares his fangs, leaping onto Mr. Kent, although his face is no longer recognized. He is just meat and blood and something to hurt. He dives into him and they clatter to the floor, He feels this beautiful sensation of joints popping and bones breaking and flesh bruising. His own or the creature he has landed on top of is unsure, but it is music to the vile creature's ears. Somewhere deep inside, Chris screams, but he can no longer control this play. He is just another member of the audience, and his body is but a puppet to his own anger.
Kent, now looking up at this hissing, ravenous creature, realizes that he's not getting through to the man who once was in that body anytime soon. Almost reflexively, the Toreador gives a hiss of his own, just a quick, and grabs Chris and is able to roll him off of his own body. As he stands up, he realizes that he doesn't stand a chance against a monster as, well, dangerous as this. So, he does what any self-respecting businessman would do in this. He turns and begins to run as fast as he possibly can, feeling the claws of Chris behind him, swiping at his jacket. He could feel the venom and the anger chasing him out of that room. Kent doesn't care to look back. Instead, he leaps down the stairs, nimbly landing, and as he kicks the back door open, he prays that this monster isn't going to chase him out into the open. And as he begins to run and feel that there's distance between the two of them, Kent pulls out his cell phone and begins to make a call. Jonathan, yes, Johnny, shut up. Call Granite. Tell him his fucking bodyguard just killed. I'm fine. He killed my business partner, and he tried to kill me. Yes, I'm fucking serious. Do it. Also, get me in contact with the Primogen and the Prince. I've got a fucking mess to clean up.
The strike from the Toreador sends Chris's body reeling. He flies with a strength he didn't know that this combatant had into one of the glass displays, causing glass to crash in around him. His face firmly planted in the floor, he looks up, snarling, looking for anything for him to vent his frustrations on. Unable to locate the Toreador, he simply goes through the glass partition, smashing the glass into tiny little shards in an explosion of rage. He lands, eyes blaring, looking at the inhabitants of this bar, unable to control himself, seeing more victims for his frustrations. Leaping, he smashes a waiter with the butt of his fist, causing his jaw to crack and tremble, his body to fly past the bar, smashing into the expensive and beautifully selected scotches, causing them to smash and roll down and trickling against the bar itself. The people, shocked and stunned. A silence descends, one only caused by the shadow of violence. And then they begin to run.
And so, this is where Jack O'Shea, or as he was once known, Felix Rogers' story ends. In excruciating violence at the hands of a man who has shown excruciating violence. The kine will run from the cigar shop. The police will be called, and very soon the blinking red, white, and blue lights will begin to illuminate the city. Sirens will blare into the night, signaling that this was a night of excruciating violence. And the Toreador desperately tries to gather together what resources he has to stop this breach of the masquerade. A figure, a beast, screeches in the night. And this is where our scene will end.